I'm Dan.
I'm Louie.
And you're listening to Dead Man Walking. Because when there's no more room in production hell, The Dead will be screened at the theater.
So dead. Alright, so we're here today. It's a little bit dated. We're talking about Justice League. Partly because it's almost like a general review of where the DC EU, they can't just go universe, is at in general.
Wait, what's the E stand for?
Extended. And that
Why is it extended?
Well, I understand that because DC has actually been super active on TV for a really long time. Like ever since the early 2000s with Smallville. And most of their television shows have actually been really successful. You've got Smallville, you have Gotham, you have Arrow, you have The Flash.
Well, yeah, because they haven't just been limited to Disney channels like I think Marvel shows have.
But none of those are related to the movies, so they don't want people to get confused. But either way, the most recent one is Justice League, and Justice League had a lot of people kind of like perking up thinking, oh, this franchise might not actually be dead.
Well, Wonder Woman did that.
But the real question was, could it translate beyond Patty Jenkins' wizardry?
Yes.
I tell you what, if she can make Wonder Woman 2 equally good, they should just give the entire franchise to her forever. That woman is amazing.
Yeah, wholeheartedly
Patty Jenkins,
agree.
marry me.
Whoa. How old is Patty Jenkins?
Don't care. Does not important. Age is just a number.
Hey, that's So
Dan, what do you think?
We're talking about
Justice League.
Okay. 2017, because we're counting this as a 2017 film, even though we're in the new year, and that's when I finally got around to seeing it, is an interesting year for me. Because there's three big movie extended universes going on right now. There's the Marvel one, obviously. There's DC, and there's Star Wars, which Disney has taken off with.
Technically, there's 4, but Universal drove it into the ground with their opening film.
Oh, that's right. Who can forget The Mummy?
So yeah, Universal does exist in case anyone was worried.
Starring Tom Cruise.
They don't know how to make a movie.
Did they ever plan a sequel for that?
They planned them. I don't know if they're still in production. But back to Justice League.
All right. But my point was, because Justice League, I actually liked it. Now, I was at the point where Star Wars I was hopeful for. DC, I was losing hope. That has gotten completely flipped around.
So... Let me see if I can get this straight. In terms of Man of Steel, technically the first movie you're feeling kind of meh, not super memorable.
Yeah, it was not memorable. It wasn't like really bad. It was just kind of...
Batman versus Superman, you hated it.
Hate's a strong word.
You did not like it.
There was worse movies than Batman vs. Superman, but Batman vs. Superman was a mess.
Suicide Squad
was also a mess.
And then Wonder Woman was like the first was like, oh, we might actually see something interesting out of this. But Justice League, we finally start to see it kind of tie together. I think above anything else, it's a fun movie. Like if that's as far as you want to go for the review, it's fun to watch.
Yeah, I'll say that. So we have the good, the bad, and the ugly.
The good, the bad, and the ugly.
We each wrote down for this movie. I think you probably still think higher of this movie than I do. Because I think this movie still has a lot of glaring flaws, which I'll get into.
Full disclosure, while we're both something of comic book nerds, I'm a bigger fan of DC than Dan is. I always have been. I always found DC to be a little bit more gritty than Marvel. Not sure why, but... So I liked Batman versus Superman. It was kind of funny because you could see that in audience reaction. All the comic book nerds really liked it, but it's because you kind of had to be immersed in it to really appreciate all the little hints Zack Snyder's dropping.
Which is where it kind of moves into niche territory.
Which is something you can't do with a $300 million budget.
Exactly.
So, the good. What was the first thing you thought was good about Justice League?
All right, so unlike Batman vs. Superman, this movie wasn't boring and convoluted. It held my attention through the whole thing, and it was exciting. That doesn't sound like super great praise, but coming off of Zack Snyder's last film, it was a big step up. It was a plot I could follow. It had a sequence. It had a few things that, Could have been explained better, but for the most part, it held my attention pretty well. It was a fun summer movie.
I kind of want to disagree with you about BVS being boring, but I feel like we're gonna get lost down that rabbit hole really fast.
We'll talk about BVS.
But I agree with
this.
the good. The story is much more straightforward by comparison. They're excellent visuals. There's a lot of stuff going bang that it gets your attention, but at the same time, there's still interesting character dialogue. There's fun little moments scattered throughout the movie, if you're willing to look for them. And you don't have to be super familiar with the universe, so to speak, to understand why the characters are doing what they're doing.
Well, and that's the part where I would say it was boring and convoluted, because I haven't read as many DC comics. I've read hardly any. And
you're a scrub.
I haven't seen that much of the TV shows, and that's kind of where that movie appealed to people. So it didn't really appeal to me in that respect, whereas it did to you, I know. And that's where it left me lost, was they would kind of reference a few things. There would be a lot of imagery. Zack Snyder's very good at adapting graphic novels, adapting comics, because he has...
You know when you're watching a Zack Snyder movie.
Yeah, he does have that flair.
It feels like a comic book. It's very dark, and nobody is wearing a shirt. The man hates shirts. People thinks it's a sexist thing. No, he like men, women. He doesn't care. Take that shirt off. Zack Snyder's directing.
What was the? Okay, let's get to your good here.
See, I agree about the storyline. The next two I got for good are actually the same. They're on both the good and the bad, but there's a reason for it. So,
okay,
and they're both the tone and the humor. The good about the tone, both story-wise and visually, is that like the hardcore DC fans like Zack Snyder. He's exceptionally dark because the past 30, 40 years, DC has been consistently darker than Marvel. A little more gritty, a little more grounded. And a lot of people were crapping on the Man of Steel movie because they were expecting another like stupidly optimistic Christopher Reeve Superman reboot. This wasn't it. But Superman hasn't been Christopher Reeves for a really long time.
Well, yeah, there hasn't been a memorable Superman movie for a long
However,
time.
to get a larger audience beyond the niche market you're talking about, you need to lighten things up a little bit. You got to give them a light at the end of the tunnel instead of just caving the tunnel in on them. And with this movie, people have been fighting constantly over, was Snyder doing the tone lifting, or was it the reshoots that Joss Whedon was doing? And I feel like that's not super important. The fact is, it happened. You got those moments of optimism. You got the moments of fun, but it didn't marvelize the movie.
Hopefully Warner Brothers can plan better so that there isn't all of these reshoots. Hopefully we're getting to a point now where they've figured out that tone.
That's not completely their fault, though, because there were two very unexpected things that happened. One, Zack Snyder's kid died, and so I kind of took him out of the game during while they were heading into post.
Was that in the middle of... That was going into post.
Well, it wasn't necessarily going to post. They were wrapping up shooting. They were getting down towards the end of shooting. His kid died, and that'll take it out anyone. Second, Wonder Woman did fantastic in the movie theaters, which no one was really expecting. They're like, oh, shoot, we got to put more Wonder Woman in this movie stat, which is a good decision. Anything with Gal Gadot is always a good decision.
Yes. Okay, so I agree there with the characters. I said fun characterization. The Flash is a huge dork. Gal Gadot is still the gorgeous Olympian goddess. And Aquaman is apparently a frat bro.
Which, that's good because, I'll be honest, I don't really care about Aquaman in the comic books, but at least in all the cartoons, that's who he was. He was always like the weirdly laid back in the face of supreme danger character. You never meant to take him seriously, and that was... Jason Momoa, he just nailed that. It's like, sup, bros? World's getting destroyed. And I love it.
Just to make it, the characterization, I'm glad they pulled that off, right off the bat. I'm glad the team got together at the beginning of the movie. It wasn't that far into it when we met everybody and we were getting what was advertised to us in the trailers. It wasn't like in Batman vs. Superman where we were advertised Batman and Superman fighting each other. Wonder Woman's going to be in it. Here's Doomsday. That all happened at the very end. In Justice League, it happens right away. Your reasons for going to see the movie happen immediately. And they're fun. All the characters... I mean, Cyborg was so-and-so. He did okay. Batman was
that one, I think, was the only one that was a little weird to me.
Yeah.
But then again, most of his appearances in comics and cartoons anyway, he shows up you already know him as Cyborg. Right. This one, you think about it, if your body's just been invaded by a machine, you're probably going to be a little bent out of shape. There was only one big exception to the characterization that I'll talk about later, but other than that, the actors for the heroes just embody these characters. Like, Ben Affleck still surprises me as a good Batman. I would have never called that before this.
I also, going into the tying in with the characters, the Flash being a huge dork, there was more humor in this one. It was a little less brooding, which was this felt a little more upbeat. Like, it still kind of had that. And
that's the third good thing we got is the humor. The humor, it needs a little bit more humor. Now, again, you have to be careful not to Marvelize the movie, because this would be the big temptation for DC to imitate Marvel. But people aren't going to a DC movie to see a Marvel movie.
Well, that was something you had said to me before about Batman in particular. He can deliver jokes, but he has to be in his own Batman kind of style.
It's got to be Batman. You can't.
Yeah.
And this is something that bugged me later, which again I'll talk about.
Well, it was something that you did say that, like, you could kind of see Joss Whedon's imprint on it.
Trying to turn him into Tony Stark, which is such a huge mistake.
He kind of delivers those jokes of like, oh, wait, what? Or like, I'm trying to describe
it's that
the kind
Joss
of
Whedon, because Joss Whedon prides himself on like being the Quentin Tarantino of dialogue for trendy people, but it's just like, oh, awkward. But DC humor has always been a little bit more dry, and it's always been more physical. That's why here's like,
I think it worked for The Flash. I mean,
yes, and that's the thing is, like, okay, here's
part of what elevated
spoilers, if you will. But if you didn't already know, Superman comes back in this movie. They made that pretty obvious from the trailer. And there's a scene where the Flash like enters into his Speed Force or whatever and starts running around behind Superman. The rest of the world is like frozen in time because the Flash is moving so fast. And all of a sudden you see Superman's head just turn and he starts looking at Flash and Flash is like, what?
That was pretty
There
funny.
were a couple scenes like that, like the very physical humor that's funny. Like the Man of Steel, one of the scenes that cracked me up is like Superman as Clark Kent's getting picked on in a bar. And he can't fight back because he's Superman. And if he punches the guy, he's going to knock his head into the next county. So he just calmly leaves, and the guy who's picking on him goes out in the parking lot and finds his truck wrapped around the nearest telephone pole in his little knot. And it's hilarious.
I don't remember that part of the movie. I forgot most of that movie.
Again, it's because he suck.
Maybe I'll rewatch these.
But that kind of leads me into what I thought was the bad of the film. The tone was inconsistent, and you can tell. Again, I feel like a lot of that's chalked up to the Joss Whedon reshoots. Not bad they brought him in, but his instinct is going to be to turn it...
It's not just Joss Whedon reshoots, it's reshoots in general. Because the same thing happened with Suicide Squad. There's a super tonal change. So many people picked it out. It was a lot more obvious, I think, in Suicide Squad. I think Justice League, it was a little easier to forget that it was there because the movie was fun enough and still carried on despite that. But Warner Brothers ordering those reshoots is ultimately what made that happen.
But again, Warner Brothers has to be careful. They have to resist the temptation to Marvelize these movies, because if they turn everything to Joss Whedon dialogue, it's going to be a mess. Because here's the thing, one thing that bugs me about the Avengers is eventually all the characters start to sound the same, because Joss Whedon writes in one tone of voice, and that's snark.
He's not doing them anymore.
I know he's not doing them anymore, but I'm saying DC is trying to rope him into their stable. And I, for one, after hearing about that leaked Wonder Woman script, I do not want him anywhere near Wonder Woman. That's just going to be so creepy and weird.
I did not hear about that, but...
But that kind of leads me to the second thing that I was frustrated with a little bit was the humor. And that is the physical humor from the fight scenes was great. Like the entire scene where they're fighting Superman was great.
I would love to see more of that in more superhero movies in general, because I actually miss a lot of more physical humor. It's one of the reasons why I still like Edgar Wright movies, because I feel like he still tries to incorporate some of that. Go back and watch any old silent film, and they're just funny for reasons that no movie today is.
You don't need language to communicate slapstick, and slapstick, contrary to popular opinion, is not dead. But by contrast, in terms of scenes, that entire scene where they're squabbling, like, was that meant to be the Batcave? It just looked like a warehouse underground.
It was meant to be the Batcave. Like, the Flash points it out through something. He's like, whoa, it's like a Batcave.
Side note, that's a crappy Batcave. But that whole scene...
Because there's no stone. Like, you think of the Batcave, you actually think of a giant cavern, and that's always been the iconic image of the Batcave. And
I get they're trying to industrialize him,
yeah.
but it's weird. And again, this is my problem, because that entire scene to me was just hot garbage. And here's why. Because all of a sudden, characters just start acting weird. Batman starts acting like a narcissistic Tony Stark-esque butthole who's like just stammering and stuttering and trying to cut in on people. And he's suddenly tongue-tied over Wonder Woman, who he couldn't care about less in the previous movies. I guess now that's suddenly an interest of his. Everyone's just kind of like jabbing at each other. Wonder Woman, who's been composed this entire time, just suddenly flips the crap out for no real good reason. Like, she's had 70 years to deal with Steve Trevor's death, and suddenly the mention of his name just sends her over the edge. But that whole scene where they're trying to get that little like quippy, snarky back and forth stuff, that's what I don't want to see in a DC movie, because all of a sudden, yeah, you're getting this what the producers think of realistic dialogue, but it makes the characters feel weird.
They needed some way to build like character friction. They couldn't just have like all these characters suddenly band up and then get along very well. They probably could have done it a better way, but I understand why that scene was there. It could have been better.
Well, you could do that in so many ways. You have to use their own individual personality traits. Superman is the cheesy one-liner guy because at the end of the day, he's still your Saturday morning hero. Like Aquaman, weirdly laid back.
As forgettable...
Flash, a little neurotic.
Which, as forgettable as Man of Steel was, Superman's character was suddenly elevated more so because of the ensemble.
It was, and that's where he does the best, is he is the Deus Ex Machina. And my big thing for Warner Brothers is keep the characters unique. Keep them unique, and people will keep loving them.
Well, they're not actually like roping Joss Whedon into.
Well, I know, but I'm just saying, like,
they?
I have no idea, but I know that they're going to want to try and take it in a more Marvel direction because Marvel is still making boatloads of money.
I'm still not 100% confident that like everything good in this movie was Zack Snyder, and then the Joss Whedon was all the bad parts.
No, I'm not saying that
tempted
either.
to think that actually Joss Whedon did add positive elements.
He
to
did.
This movie.
He was. I'm like I said, I don't want to speculate. I'm pretty sure he's the reason that the tone was shifted. Zack Snyder needs an intervention. The man has to get out of his sewer pit and come see daylight with the rest of us. As the one, I think one guy put it, he's like, it looked like Joss Whedon just came up and turned up the contrast wheel a little bit so we could actually see more colors than besides gray and brown. That's good. I don't want to dump on Joss Whedon. The man was good for this movie.
I've been dumping on Zack Snyder a lot, and I feel a little better about it now because Justice League, he still gets credit for this movie, and Joss Whedon even pointed out during production that this is still Zack Snyder's film. They give full credit to Zack Snyder for the director. And I was also thinking back on earlier movies that I liked a little better of his. I want to go see Dawn of the Dead remake.
The fact remains, if he wants to keep it going, he does need a wake-up call because he has to give the audience a chance to breathe.
Maybe go on like a sabbatical, whatever M. Night Shyamalan had to do to get his tone back.
I know. I have to watch Split because everyone said it was really good. And I'm like, what?
It feels like a return to form for that director. It feels like back to watching the movies that we liked that he made.
So what else you got for bad?
All right. So for the bad, Steppenwolf was a stupid villain, and I kept thinking about the band.
I actually have him in my ugly. That's how rough that was.
Steppenwolf, he was, once again, DC stands out as having stronger villains. Marvel kind of stands out for having stronger characters. DC,
and this
at least
is what,
it's movies.
This
especially
is what made
films.
me so angry. Of all the villains to choose, why Steppenwolf? Like, even among the evil team he's a part of, he's one of the least memorable characters.
And he's supposed to be related to Darkseid somehow. And this is where the plot got a little closer to the Batman vs. Superman side, where it would not fully explain things. He mentions Darkseid once, I think.
And that's the other thing that made Darkseid is...
One time.
He's basically Thanos for the DC universe. Marvel has been teasing Thanos consistently since what, like their fourth movie, I think, in their series.
Oh, The Avengers.
Yeah,
he was in the end credits of The Avengers. Yeah.
And I actually think Darkseid came before Thanos.
In comic books.
Yeah, the new gods, as they're called, created by Jack Kirby, and this is what bugs me: is Darkseid. Quick recap: he's the ruler of an evil planet that's entirely devoted to war. It's one giant war machine, and he has a whole group of superpowered underlings that carry out his bidding. I forget what they're called. There's like his elite squad. And Steppenwolf is just like one of a dozen of them. The one, like, there were so many better options you could have. Like, if you wanted to have not Darkseid, there's a guy named Calibac who is Darkseid's son, who is the one in the comics that's always showing up on Earth to hit people with his stick, and he's always beating up Superman. He would have been great for this.
Maybe they're playing a longer game than we realize. Maybe there's like a dozen more Justice League movies in the works to just have every single one of Darkseid's minions come down.
If that's the case, they're getting way too ambitious. The other question I have is like, why not Darkseid himself? You could have him come in. They can foil his plan. Like, he's trying to bring himself to Earth. You have Cyborg going, oh no, we don't want this guy on Earth. They keep him from coming to Earth with their grand final battle. And you just hear him giving the ominous, like, I'll be back.
I'm okay
Something
with
like
them
that.
pulling out a lesser character from their toolbox to work with. That's fine. Because
But
that is what Spider-Man did. How big is the Vulture in comics?
Well, the thing is, that's actually what I wanted to talk about. Is like all the comic book movies right now have a huge villain problem, with maybe like 3 or 4 exceptions. Both DC and Marvel, the villains suck. Loki was a good villain. I actually think that General Zod and Man of Steel was a good villain, but they killed him off right away, and so there's their chance to keep him coming back.
And they had him reincarnated by the Jesse Eisenberg Lex Luthor as Rockman.
That's the thing is like they wasted Doomsday, but so you had Loki, you have got General Zod, and the Guardians of the Galaxy. The villains in those movies have been decent. They've been interesting.
Yes, the first one, Ronan the Accuser, I think he could have been done better, but I really liked his performance.
Yes, that's the thing is he was brought to life by the actor, and so it was a decent villain. But everything else, like, just shapeless blobs. Ultron should have been fantastic, and instead you're just fighting an army of identical robots.
Well, Ultron was like, he felt like more of just an Iron Man villain is what they turned him into rather than the global threat. They could have really emphasized that a little
and all the villains are always doing the exact same thing. Everybody wants to blow up the world.
We gotta stop the blue laser
Even
shooting
Suicide
in the sky.
Squad, where like half of the team is literally just bank robbers. They're like, oh, here, fight this super-powered villain who's going to blow up the world.
Stop the laser shooting into space.
And so it's like, that's what they do with this one. And we get like a mo-capped Mance Raider staggering around talking about how he wants to blow up the world. And no one cares.
It's true. We need better motivations for our villains. We just need more interesting villains. And this one, out of all of the dumb villains that just their master plan is to create a giant laser in the sky that blows up Earth, this one is the worst. This one is the least fleshed out. This one...
Clearly, you did not see the second Fantastic Four movie.
I didn't.
Not the reboot, the sequel to the first one. That was rough. They literally fought a space cloud.
I heard about that.
The bar could go lower, that's all I'm saying.
Well, now that apparently Disney is acquiring that whole thing, maybe we'll see Galactus.
But that's why I think Spider-Man Homecoming was so good on so many levels, was they're ramping it properly, because that's why Vulture was actually the first supervillain that Spider-Man ever fought in the comic books.
Okay.
And that's why it works. Is Spider-Man, your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Vulture is like your blue-collar class criminal. He's not going to blow up the world. He's just a dude with a suit that can fly who wants to steal some crap. That's all he wants to do.
Apparently, okay, so I was reading, going back to Justice League, Steppenwolf. Apparently, in this movie, he's trying to win back favor with Darkseid.
And they never mention that.
It's never mentioned. Like, that would have given him more motivation to be there. Instead, his only motivation was like, this is who he is. He is the conqueror of worlds. He's come to combine squares to kill everyone. That's it.
I'm really hoping that there's a director's cut of this where we get a little bit more backstory for that in particular. Everything else I thought was all right, but that and just you just don't care.
I don't remember the line, but he says Darkseid once, and to even comic book fans, I can't imagine that's at all a satisfying hint, because we already knew this was building up to Darkseid.
So, and that I think is like the only other thing I had for the bad is just the boardroom direction for the entire DC EU, because talking about stuff cut out. These movies, none of these movies started out with the antiseptic, lifeless, corporately rendered feel, but they've all ended up that way because the whole thing feels like it's being run by a boardroom.
Well, they have to make these decisions in light of we need to make money, and they did look at Wonder Woman and say, hey, Wonder Woman made a lot of money. We need to relook. And in this case, I don't know what Zack Snyder's original vision was. I don't know if Joss Whedon coming in and doing those reshoots actually did help it.
I mean, I think it did, but I think they need to find a balance, because right now, like they're looking at Marvel, which is the Marvel movies are practically semi-independent of each other, except when they come together for their big buddy films. Warner Brothers is running these like they're interlocked, like they're all in the same plot line.
Well, they don't have as many of them.
Kind of like how Star Wars should be, but isn't.
They don't have as many of them. The issue is we had one standalone movie, and then we had like a halfway team-up movie, and then we had Guardians of the Galaxy, which was, or supposedly going to be their Guardians of the Galaxy, and then was a huge steaming pile of mess, Suicide Squad.
I was like, what are you talking about? Well, Suicide Squad's the only one that's been like tangential to everything else. The only tie-in they've had has been just oblique references to Superman, and then Batman showing up to like punch some ladies in the face. A lot of women get punched in the face in that movie.
And then after that, we have the big team-up movie. We don't have as many, the same volume of films that they're pumping out.
They're trying to jump on the train before it leaves. Either way, I'm just saying they need to find a balance between controlling the directors and letting the directors... Like, they give Zack Snyder too much leash when he shouldn't have it, and then they rein directors in when they don't need to be reined in. They gotta...
We're going to talk a little more about how Warner Brothers is handling this.
So what do you got for the ugly? I already said the ugly thing.
Hold on. I'm not done with my bad.
More bad?
I'm not done with my bad.
Man, you hated this movie.
Give Atlantis an establishing shot and a proper introduction. In short, there's still stuff that isn't quite explained enough. We go to Atlantis. We go to Atlantis as if we've already been there before. We never seen this before. Okay?
I didn't notice it as much because it's like the second they get there, they're fighting, so you don't really have time to think about it. You're like, oh man, Aquaman, what's he gonna do?
No, okay. Many critics agree that the Thor movies in the Marvel universe, like the first couple, were among like the worst of the Marvel movies so far.
I don't like any of it.
And you didn't like the third one?
Okay, Ragnarok was fun, but that's just because of the junk planet.
I enjoyed Thor for what it was. I thought they weren't bad. But in Thor, they at least give you an establishment of...
That's true.
Why can't I think of their
Asgard?
Asgard, yes. We get an understanding of what Asgard is before we just kind of get thrown in there.
I think that's the big problem with DC is they're just expecting you to accept things.
Establishing shots are there for a reason, so that we know where the hell we're going. Please tell us where we're going, Zack Snyder.
We're in the water, Dan.
We're somewhere in the water.
It only covers 70% of the Earth.
We take, even though we've seen Wonder Woman, they at least take a little bit of time to explain Wonder Woman's powers. We see brief shots of her seeing bullets in slow motion before she starts zipping around blocking bullets. We don't get any of that with Aquaman. He just starts propelling through the water and jumping all around. We just kind of accept it. That one wasn't quite as bad. The Flash, you get a brief explanation. People are already kind of familiar with the Flash. Cyborg's not too hard to figure out.
No.
But a little bit more backstory on some of this stuff would have been nice.
Again, I think because they're doing all the movies backwards, like you said.
Yes. And then last thing for the bad is the Justice League needs a standout soundtrack that's half as memorable as Wonder Woman's theme.
That's true.
They needed, when all of them come together, Avengers has it. The Guardians of the Galaxy has it. Wonder Woman has her own.
I don't remember the Avengers soundtrack hardly at all.
it's still there. And when you it's not memorable after you're done watching the movie, but you know it's there while you're watching it.
Wonder Woman's like the weird like Amazon scream and the drum beat like that. Yeah, I still remember that.
And that's a kick ass. That works really well for Wonder Woman.
Almost said it as my girlfriend's ringtone. Like, she probably wouldn't appreciate that.
But I needed that like jingle. Instead, the only thing that comes to mind when I think of Justice League is that it says if Justice League did indeed have a theme in this movie, I missed it over the Come Together cover song that was being played. That thing in the trailer.
That one moment when Superman comes back and they give you like that brief interlude of the old Superman music, that was kind of fun. I think that would do a lot for these movies if they bring back like the soaring orchestral stuff, because you can have it gritty, but that big orchestral soundtrack in the background, like the John Williams I think did the Superman soundtrack from the old movies, that would do a lot to balance out the darker, gritty feel of things.
And that would be one way to make it distinct from Marvel, which is something they're looking to do. Marvel's soundtrack is
just the radio.
It's just working. It's very forgettable. It's just there to service the rest of the movie, and you can forget about it. DC can do something different. We can give a big orchestral score to go with it, to the big heroic moments that happen. You know?
So
that's what I have. That's my bad.
Moving on to the things that were ugly in this movie. I already said my first ugly thing is Steppenwolf. Not just the fact that he was a character, but the way they designed him was weird.
Oh, it was sloppy.
Like, and you watch Game of Thrones, it was Mance Rayder, but they just mocapped the crap out of him, and it looks like a video game character. Again, it's not the first time a comic book movie has done this, but it feels kind of egregious in a movie with a budget this big.
I can understand why all his flying bug things need to be CG, but why couldn't he have been like a real person that's just using camera tricks to like look bigger or something?
They could have at least like left his real face in there.
Yeah, like anything like that.
Like they did with Ares and Wonder Woman, like the uncomfortably British man who's somehow a Greek god.
That was the worst part of that movie. Everything else in that movie is awesome.
Yeah. So what do you got for the ugly there?
Well, my first one, you might disagree with this. Batman is an unimpressive old man in this. He feels that way. There's a lot of parts in this where he's just kind of getting his butt kicked, and we don't have those moments where he's the clever Batman.
I actually agree with that, and it's kind of bugsy because like we saw from the last one in Batman vs. Superman, Batman kicks butt.
Yes.
He's a badass.
Yes.
This one, it's like he's like stuttering. He's like taking the backseat. He's like, the whole point is Batman's meant to be smarter and more clever than everyone else. That ultimately is Batman's superpower. He's a smart cookie.
One of the few things that Batman vs. Superman did very well for me was establishing Ben Affleck as a very good Batman. Like, they did that very well. He
defying
did kick
all
ass.
expectations.
He blew him out of the water. He was the first good Batman in my eyes, to be honest, because the rest, everybody who's played Batman before then has been pretty unmemorable. Or Christian Bale.
I don't even like
He's memorable, but for all the wrong reasons.
I don't even like him. Like, Christopher Nolan is the reason those movies were great, not Christian Bale.
Correct. And they casted the villains well, with the exception of Bane.
Was it Michael Keaton? Was it first Batman? That's his name?
Yeah, he was.
He played the Vulture too, but
Michael Keaton.
He was a better Batman than almost all the ones that followed him, in my opinion.
He was in Batman and Batman Returns.
Yep.
And then they switched to Val Kilmer,
which made no sense, especially because that was when he was starting to get fat.
And then they switched
George Clooney with nipples on his suit.
Which was the most corny of all the Batman live action.
I still have a soft spot in my heart for the 90s Batman movies. Okay. I will not apologize for those.
Those are more corny. I haven't actually seen those. I feel like I'm
Speaking of
missing
bad characterization, one of my other ugly points is, spoilers, bonus credit scene, as if you didn't know, Lex Luthor is coming back, and Jesse Eisenberg is still Lex Luthor. This has made me so angry. It's not, people were complaining because in Batman vs. Superman he has long hair. I've never had a problem with that because it's meant to be young Lex Luthor. And the thing is, Jesse Eisenberg, both with hair and without it, actually looks like a Lex Luthor. The problem is the second he opens his mouth, You just get like the whiny, neurotic Mark Zuckerberg, but now trying to take over the world.
I was thinking about this earlier today, and it seems as if what I guess they were trying to go for is, correct me if I'm wrong, but Lex Luthor's character appeals to the masses.
Well, Lex Luthor was meant to be this incredibly savvy billionaire businessman. So they're trying to think, oh, what does that look like in the 21st century?
Mark
It looks
Zuckerberg.
like Mark Zuckerberg.
Mark Zuckerberg. Who played Mark Zuckerberg recently?
Like, it's just such a... Because the thing is, it's just such a dumb casting choice.
But he doesn't look anything like he does in the comics. Like, so many other characters feel like they were pulled right from the page. Another character you see in that end credit sequence, Slade. Deathstroke, right?
Photocopy from the comic book.
He looks exactly
right down to the
like,
orange.
Exactly. Like, he looks brilliant. But then he's sitting right next to Jesse Eisenberg, and wow.
I'm thinking, like, there's so many other excellent... Like, James McAvoy, if I'm saying his name right, the guy that plays young Professor X in the X-Men movies.
Okay.
You got Bryan Cranston, already looks good bald. Has that, like, sinister, intelligent menace.
You've named great bald people so far.
Benny Doodle Cumberbund. Shave that dude's head. He's scary. Anyone else who doesn't look like they're 12 and have ADHD.
Benedict Cumberbatch. I didn't think of that.
My other thought was, why not Mark freaking Strong? The man's already bald. He already has a voice that's deeper than gravel. He just sounds...
Wait, Lewis, I thought he was already Lex Luthor. In real life.
Oh, okay, that would blow his cover. So that was my ugly thing. I was like, oh, it's a real minor point. He's barely in the movie. I just hate him.
That's something that they should take from Marvel's playbook. Remember when the Incredible Hulk, when Bruce Banner was Edward Norton? I remember when they placed Edward Norton for the much better
Mark Ruffalo.
Mark Ruffalo.
Like nothing happened.
Yeah, exactly. Like no mention of it.
They could get away with it if they wanted to. This was their chance, and they blew it. That's what I'm saying. It bugs me. It's like, you could have him like change since he's been in prison. Like, wow, you've aged really fast. I am the one who knocks.
That's the perfect transition. Do it.
What else you got for
Please. Ugly? I got a couple more things. Well, here we go.
I've only got one thing left on Ugly.
Okay, there's a shot that seems to be a subtle tribute to the superhero buttocks. You might not know what I'm talking about, but there's one particular...
A lot of butts in this movie, and I be specific.
There's a lot of butts. The Gal Gadot butt shots I appreciated. Gal Gadot is her name, by the way.
Gal Gadot.
I gotta correct myself here. Show the woman some respect. There's a shot where they're all jumping out of Batman's, like, crawly mobile or whatever, and the camera is kind of, like, panned right by the floor, and everybody's jumped out, and you only see their, like, lower halves as they're, like, jumping out and, like, crouched down for a second, so all their butts are sticking out. And I wanted to know if somebody's idea was, like, we gotta do this. We gotta pay tribute to all those superhero butts. We see a lot of them.
And I'm not sure who would be to blame for that, because both Zack Snyder and Joss Whedon have a big appreciation for butts. A lot of their establishing shots involve posteriors.
Have you seen 300? They didn't have... the Spartans didn't like clothes, but I mean, I think even they would be blushing if they saw this movie.
Those two gentlemen have a great appreciation for the human form. What else you got?
This might be the same as yours. I'm just predicting. You tell me if I'm wrong.
Hit me.
Superman's face.
His creepy lip.
You got it. That's what it is.
Anyone who doesn't know the story behind this, Henry Cavill, he's in some movie.
He's in the new 007.
007 movie.
So that's something that, like...
Wait, they're making another James Bond movie?
Yeah.
Oh.
And he's apparently in it as something.
And he's got a mustache. He grew a mustache for this movie, and they needed him to come back and do the reshoots. Is it 20th Century Fox that's making the new... I don't remember what studio. Long story short, it's not the same studio that's making Justice League.
Right.
And Warner Brothers said, can we shave his stash?
No, he is contractually obligated to keep that mustache.
So they spent an ungodly amount of money to put a CGI lip over his mustache. I didn't even notice it the first time, and then I was going back and looking at pictures of it, and I was like, wow, that is really weird.
Oh no, I noticed it right away. It was distracting. Every time he started speaking, I just kept staring at his upper lip. It was horrifying. Every time they do this, somebody...
I would dial
It
it
wasn't
back. It
just-
wasn't that bad. But
It was
it's like,
distracting.
once you notice it, like, you can go the whole movie and not notice it. But once you do notice it, there's no unseeing it. It's like when you're looking at it's like one of those pictures where it's like, find the hidden image, and you can't see it for the life of you, then you step back and like, oh, there it is. And now no matter where you go in the room, that's the first thing you see in that picture.
Maybe that's why. Maybe if it's not ruined for you, if they didn't, leak that bit out, I wouldn't have noticed it. You saying that might have been a possibility?
Because I didn't notice it when I watched it like initially, and I watched it like the first week it came out.
I noticed it immediately, and I couldn't unsee it from then on. It's not through the whole movie, so you can tell the parts that were reshoots.
Yes.
You could tell them immediately, because some of them were Henry Cavill's real face, and some of them were clearly not. Most of them were clearly not, if I'm remembering this correctly. I feel like most of the movie I was very distracted by his upper lip.
It doesn't damage the movie in any way. It's just a little bit weird. So, I mean, in summary, the movie is good. It's a lot more uplifting than the previous establishments. They still have to find a bit of a balance for what they want to do with it. They got to find better villains. I mean, those are the three big takeaways for me.
And that's something that these movies need to do in general. Like, now that Thanos has come for, like, the next big Avengers movie. Yeah, for reals this time. Like, they better pull them off amazing, because we've never had a big-time villain like that done well, I don't think. I think it's only the small-time villains that have been very compelling.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, Vulture was so refreshing. Like, Michael Keaton's just a great actor to begin with, and he embodied that role very well, but there was just so much about it that was refreshing.
The interesting thing moving forward for the DC EU will be what happens next, because Zack Snyder is actually not involved with the next 4 or 5 movies that are slated to come out. The one that's coming out the soonest is Aquaman. I'm actually really looking forward to that movie for one reason. I have no idea how the horror mogul James Wan was tapped to make the Aquaman movie, or why his literally unknown protege David F. Sandberg is doing Shazam. But I kind of want to see how that's going to play out. James Wan's the guy who created the Saw films, and he made a bunch, basically...
Whoa. I thought Saw was a Wes Craven thing.
No. He may have been one of the producers. The guy who created the script, who created the character, who created the puppet itself...
Oh.
Is James Wan.
I thought that was like the last thing Wes Craven did before he died.
He may have produced it, but he did not write it.
Okay. You sure he didn't direct it?
I'm positive.
Okay.
He also made all the Conjuring movies. He made the Insidious movies. Like, the man, all the big horror movies that have come out recently, like in the past decade, James Wan has been involved in like half of them. The only non-horror film he's made was Furious 7. And that is what has me especially interested, is that movie was racked with production difficulties because Walker died while they were still shooting in a car crash. Mm-hmm. And yet whatever he did with it was good enough that it made over $1 billion. Like, even when you have a dedicated fan base, reaching $1 billion mark is a good thing to have on the resume. So I have no idea what to expect from Aquaman. I want to see Aquaman like as the frat bro I remember in the cartoons, just like, hey, we're gonna like have a fight. It's gonna be great. Then we're gonna go swimming.
As long as he's what he was in this movie, I'll be fine with that. He was a fun character in Justice League.
I want to see it just to see what the heck happens.
I'll finally get an establishing shot of Atlantis.
Take a cold shower afterwards. Like Wonder Woman 2, Patty Jenkins, like...
Is she going to be directing the sequel?
As far as I know. If they don't let her direct the sequel, somebody in the studio needs to be taken out and shot. I mean, that would be such a huge mistake.
Correct.
She made like one other movie before Wonder Woman, but Wonder Woman was such a good film on every level, it would just be retarded.
I heard rumor that she was originally slated to direct a Marvel film.
I'd be fine with that.
And then somebody else might have swooped in. I don't know which movie that was. It wasn't Ant-Man, because I knew who was originally supposed to direct Ant-Man, and I still want to visit the parallel universe where that Ant-Man is made. I'm talking about Edgar Wright.
Either way, it's like everyone, like people were complaining about not enough women in Hollywood, and whenever people talk about female directors, they always get what's her name who made The Hurt Locker. I hate her directing style.
She's horrible.
So I just want more Patty Jenkins in everything.
Please go, Patty Jenkins. Be the inspiration for other women.
It's
Not whoever made the
Forget
Hurt Locker.
Wonder Woman. If you got a 12-year-old daughter, you take her to the theater and you make her sit through the credits and point out Patty's name. Be like, child, this is what you could be if you ever stop eating glue. Speaking of eating glue,
oh no.
Ben Affleck needs to decide what he's doing with Batman. That dude cannot decide if he likes or hates the character, and it is killing Batman's future.
One of the things that came up in my newsfeed, I didn't actually click on it, that Jake Gyllenhaal might be the new Batman.
Dude, they could even get Casey Affleck to do it. Like, he looks similar.
I want Ben Affleck to stay Batman.
Me too.
Because he's been doing so great.
But he's always like hemming and hawing, like, oh, I don't know if I want to be Batman. As a result, like the Batman standalone movie, it's been delayed like 4 times now?
Well, he was originally going to direct it, and then he decided that was a bad idea. So
I don't know what his directing chops are like, but I'm
inclined to agree with him. It's not that he would be a bad director. It's that he's also the star of the movie, and it's a big budget movie.
But they've revised the script like 3 times now. The thing is, the studio needs to drop the hammer on this because Batman is arguably the most popular comic book character in history.
They need to pull out something. Otherwise, the hype is going to be way too big. Otherwise, it's going to become the next freaking Half-Life 3 of movies or something. Because right now, Ben Affleck, he's doing a great job so far. Get that movie out while he's still there, and don't make it an origin story. No. Do what they did with Spider-Man, okay?
Just roll right into it.
Just roll right into a Batman story.
The Christopher Nolan films are close enough that people are established as to who and what Batman is. Just have him go punch somebody.
Make it a distinct Batman story, and we will love it.
He's got the best villains. You can pick any of them. They'll be interesting. I'd like to see the Penguin come back again. It'll give Hollywood a chance to rant about corporate greed or something.
Why not? They already mentioned penguin bombs in Justice League.
The real question is whether or not they're going to bring back Jared Leto's Joker. That I will be generous and say the character needs some tweaking.
Can we just get like a plot twist in and say Jared Leto's Joker was actually just imitating
the real Joker, which was actually Jesse Eisenberg.
That's what I'm just saying.
And the real Lex Luthor, who is Mark Strong, has been trapped in an underground cavern this whole time.
Perfect. Hear that, Warner Brothers? We want royalties.
If you want our fan fiction, email us.
Wink.
Patty Jenkins, marry me.
That's my username. Rotten Tomatoes, 40% for critics, 77% for audience score.
Because it's a fun movie to watch. And critics don't like it because, it's derivative, it's formulaic. That's why people go to see a superhero movie. You don't go to see a person in tights punch another person in tights because you think it's high art. Well, the sad fact of the matter is these movies are only like 1 Oscar away from that being the case. That's why everyone keeps trying to imitate Heath Ledger's Joker, because it can be real acting. Just put on the clown makeup, kill some innocent civilians, be a good villain.
Okay, Aquaman's coming up next. Wonder Woman was 92% critic, 88% audience, so everybody loved it for the most part. Suicide Squad was 26% critic and 60% audience.
I feel like Suicide Squad was just tailor-made for people to get weird tattoos. Like, every character in that film was, like, designed to be inked on someone's body.
It won an Oscar.
For what? For what? What did that garbage pile of a film win an Oscar for?
And it won it for something that I think it deserved.
Character design.
Not character design, costume design.
That's what I meant.
Yes. Costume design. And that is fair because we still see Harley Quinn outfits all the time.
That movie was clearly aimed at an entirely different demographic. So they were playing to the audience. I'll give them credit for that. I just still think it was a mess of a film. But before we go on for the next 4.5 hours, how would you rate Justice League?
Justice League, I'm going to give it
I personally give it a 4 out of 5 CGI'd off mustaches.
I'm looking forward to Warner Brothers attempting to make another Green Lantern movie. I'm not the biggest fan of Green Lantern. However, since there was Green Lantern dudes in Justice League, it's confirmed. It's in the DCEU. So,
like I said, I thought I would never say it, but I am legitimately looking forward to an Aquaman movie, and I'm not even ashamed.
Now, this movie, it had a lot of problems, but overall, I give it a somewhat of a recommendation. It's making me hopeful, so I'm going to give this a 3 out of 5 lanterns. Space lanterns.
It's a good movie. You should watch it, and while you don't have to watch Batman vs. Superman, it's almost worth watching Batman vs. Superman just to see this film.
They are setting it up like one big long story. So if you have the time to binge watch TV shows, I don't understand how people have the patience for that. You certainly have the time to watch Batman vs. Superman before this.
Don't lie, you have the time to binge watch TV shows. You know you do. You lazy, friendless piece of garbage.